Welcome back to my shop. In this video I'll show you how I built the Oakhurst bookshelf. The bookshelf consists of two sets of 4 shelves in an L shape supported by 3 legs. The bottom 6 shelves are half lapped into the legs and supported in dados. The top 2 shelves are fit into sliding dovetails. To start, I milled up some 8/4 red oak for the shelves. When I have very wide boards, I'll often rip them on my bandsaw first so they fit through my joiner better. Red oak isn't the prettiest wood. In fact, it's pretty ugly, but it's very economical, and since I was finishing this piece with opaque, black, India ink, it was a very good choice for this project. I wanted the shelves at a final thickness of 1 1/4 inches, so instead of planing them down and wasting nearly a 1/2 inch of stock, I resawed them at the bandsaw first. This 3/4 inch carbide tipped Resaw King bandsaw blade from Laguna made quick work of this oak. Using a number 7 jointer plane, I cleaned up the edges of each board for glue up. This plane is nearly 100 years old, and it's crazy to think that it's still being used making furniture. With my combination square, I drew some layout lines to drill for dowels. The joint will be plenty strong without them, but they'll help keep everything lined up during glue up. With all the dowels drilled, I glued up each of the shelves. Glue was cured, I ran everything through my drum sander to flatten the panels, remove the bandsaw marks, and bring them to a final consistent thickness. A quick touch with the random orbital sander, and the shelf panels were nearly complete. The only thing left was to cross-cut the panels to size. To start, I changed my table saw over to an 80-tooth cross-cut blade from CMT. Shelves were a bit too unwieldy to push through my table saw, so instead I trimmed the first edge with my track saw. From there, I milled up some stock for the legs. Once the legs were milled, the first step was to cut a stub tenon on the bottom to fit into the feet. The first step was to mark all the layout lines with a marking gauge and a marking knife. Then on the table saw, just raise the blade and cut to the line, using the rip fence as a stop. This is actually safe in this scenario since there's no loose offcut to get trapped between the blade and the fence. Bit of hand tool work just to clean up the rabbit. Up these wide tenon cheeks, it's a good idea to very slightly undercut them, like a few thousandths of an inch, paring away with the chisel. This makes sure that the exterior edge makes contact with the foot instead of anything further back, so there's a clean mating line between the leg and the foot. With the stub tenon complete, I moved on to the sliding dovetails. To start, I hogged out much of the waist with a dado stack and a stop block. Router table, I cut the sliding dovetail in the legs. Here, the featherboard helps keep even pressure on the workpiece for an accurate and consistent joint. Then I finished the short shelf on the router table. The long shelves were too big to push across the router table, so using my saw track and a stop block, I cut them with a handheld router. Lastly, I trimmed the tails on the legs to the right length with a handsaw and chisel. The last major operation for the legs was to cut the dados that will support the shelves as seen here. I started the layout with my combination square and marking knife, and instead of measuring, I used each shelf to get a referential measurement. This ensures that the layout is as accurate as possible. Then I used the setup block to set my dado stack to 1/4 of an inch. Then I checked the dados for proper thickness using each's corresponding shelf. Jigsaw, I made some relief cuts in the front end of each dado to accept the shelves. I chiseled away the waste and cleaned them up with a compression pattern bit in my trim router. Earlier, I only trimmed one edge of each shelf. Now, to make sure each shelf was exactly the same weight, I ganged them together and cut them with my track saw. The last operation on the shelves was to cut the slot to fit around each leg. I laid this out with a digital caliper, combination square, and a marking knife. The table saw is my most accurate tool, so I chose to use it for this cut. That said, this is a pretty dangerous cut for a number of reasons. I'm very comfortable with my saw, and I left the blade guard in place for this cut. But never make a cut you don't feel comfortable making. Your fingers will thank you. Because the circular blade on the table saw will always cut a round curve, I finished this cut with a handsaw and a chisel. After sanding the legs, I broke their front edges with a heavy chamfer on the router table. The last components to make were the 3 feet. After milling up some stock, I laid out the mortises here. Then I hogged out most of the mortise with my hollow chisel mortiser. And after cleaning up the mortises with a chisel and a router plane, they were ready for shaping. At their final shape, I broke the edges with a block plane. this piece is so large, heavy, and awkward, it needed to come apart for transport and delivery. To do this, I used some furniture tie bolts. I cut a flat-bottomed hole with a Forstner bit and then routed out a groove for the bolts. Before final assembly, I laid down some painter's tape just to protect the legs from any squeeze out. Then, I was able to glue the shelves in. With everything assembled, I broke all the edges with a trim router and a gentle chamfer. The corners that I could not get with the router, I cleaned up with a chisel. last step was to apply my finish. For this piece, I used black India ink and a coat of hard wax oil. I applied the India ink by flooding it on and brushing it with a foam brush. Then I wiped on a coat of hard wax oil with a scraper and a white Scotch-Brite pad on a random orbital sander at its lowest setting. This wasn't the most complicated piece I've ever made, but it was a lot of fun, and it is going to a good home. Hopefully, you enjoyed seeing how I got to make this piece. If you did, like and subscribe. And as always, thank you so much for watching.